I think, therefore, I am Flix presents true story based on the Russian sleep deprivation experiment.
Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 for over a month.
Good evening. Please state your name, age, and weight.
Felix Nast, age 41 years, 58 kilos.
Ulrich Schultz, age 29, 71 kilos.
Hans Berlitz, age 19, 68 kilos.
Very good. You gentlemen are about to undergo an experiment that would benefit the soldiers of the Soviet Union.
Test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days.
You will be given a gas that our nation's leading scientists have been working on. All we know is that it is not lethal, and you will be in no physical harm throughout the duration of the experiment. Upon completion of this experiment, you will be granted your freedom and returned to your homeland. Do you comply? Reminder, those who do not comply will be immediately executed for your crimes against humanity and the Soviet Union. I'll ask you once more, gentlemen. Do you comply? Very good. We will administer the gas in a few moments. Please, get acquainted with your new home. You will all notice that you have enough food for the duration of the experiment. You will find comfort in the floor as you'd had in your cell. Books for entertainment, a toilet for the obvious. Also, no one will be entering the room once the gas has been released. So it is up to you to keep your living quarters livable. The gas has been administered.
Daydreaming allows us to explore thoughts, but what we really need is sleep.
Sure is different on the other side of the gas.
Day 1, the first batch of gas has been released. Normal behavior resumes.
Boy, your name is Hans?
Yes.
Well, Hans, it is so nice to see the face of the boy who has been crying in the cell next to me for the past 3 months. Oh, come on now. Don't you think we should all be friends while we are here? Let me guess. Your father was a good, hard-working man. Taken too soon. Your mother was a housekeeper. You were the youngest of 4 children. Park. You joined the war to prove something of yourself, only to end up a victim of circumstance. Am I right?
I was the youngest of 3 children.
Ah, I was close. What about you? Ulrich, is it? Well, Hans, I will tell you my story if you tell me yours.
Okay.
Well, I was a top SS scientist, specializing in information extraction and experimentation. I took great pride in my work. It was almost therapeutic. I can still see the faces of the men. I extracted fingernails, teeth. How quickly they would rat out their own families to save their lives. Such slowly dogs.
During the day, our minds encounter fantasies, ideas, reflections. But it's a deep sleep that we really need in order to release the deep hidden fears, horrors, terrors, explore our feelings.
Your turn.
I was stationed just outside of Berlin. I didn't see much of the war, just the end of it. I was appointed guard duty one night, and I was supposed to stay awake for the duration of the night. But I fell asleep. when I awoke, everyone was slaughtered.
Осторожно, масса передатчика. Вскрывать в первую очередь. Все необходимое для жизни будет послано вам с помощью массопередатчика бесплатно. Ага.
Земной офис фирмы приветствует вас и поздравляет с прибытием на место. Не хотели бы вы сделать первый заказ?
And I ran as fast and as far as I could, but they caught me.
Фирма разорится, если станет удовлетворять все прихоти колонистов.
Прихоти? Но ведь бриться я должен.
Не обязательно. Отпускайте бороду, вам пойдет.
Took me to a prison where I sat for 3 months until I ended up here.
I thought as much.
What's your story?
The gas has been active for 4 days. And although none of the men have slept for the past 4 days,
The researchers monitored the results, watched the subjects, prisoners, very carefully.
normal behavior resumes. The gas seems to be quite effective.
These anatomy books are embarrassingly inaccurate. It's no wonder these Russians are so barbaric. They killed your father, didn't they?
Peter!
Alright, Schultz! Felix Nass down now. We're gonna end the experiment and you will be shot!
Stop this or they will shoot you! Ulrich!
Получаете второе предупреждение за сотрудничество с конкурирующей фирмой. Получаете второе предупреждение принятия услуг от конкурирующей фирмы.
The gas has been active for 7 days. Normal behavior resumes outside of the outburst on day 4. The men have still yet to sleep. It's time for some personal business. Yes. All right.
What happened the other day?
I almost killed Felix. What's happened with you?
You know what I mean. No one intervened. No one stopped you. You just looked at the wall and dropped him. What did you see? Look, at least tell me your story. Everyone's got a story.
I was a soldier. And like you, not a very good one.
Новая модель космоплавающего торгового робота.
Ну, дружище, спасибо тебе. Если бы не ты, а представители фирмы уверяли меня, что эта планета необитаема.
Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark.
I wasn't cruel in what I did, but what I stood for was damning enough, I suppose. What we all stood for was damning enough. I was stationed at a camp, a labor camp. My father was the commanding officer of the camp. He was a good man, as I remember from my childhood, but something changed in him. I went to his office one day to deliver a daily report. I opened the door and yet his back turned to me. I called to him, but he didn't answer. He just put the barrel of his Luger. And if there was one thing I could have asked him, it would be why. Was it fear? Was it remorse? Was it grief? That's why I tried.
Ulrich, I don't know how much more of this I can take. I haven't slept in days.
None of us have. It must be what the gas does. It keeps you awake. They're going to use it on their soldiers so they don't require sleep.
I can't do this anymore. I can't breathe in my own skin. I have to get out of here.
Just think of your freedom. That's what's keeping me going.
You really think we'll be gifted freedom after this?
After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones and one-way mirror portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself.
Hans has been screaming for the past 7 hours. What seems strange is that the other men have not reacted in any way. Hans has been screaming now for the past 12 hours.
After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about his behaviour is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream.
Day 12. His screams have been replaced with a faint whimper. It seems he has permanently destroyed his vocal cords. Sleep experiment. Day 12, June 14th, 1945. End log. Felix. You've come to say hello? Felix. What are you thinking, Felix?
The mind feels and sees and deals with the events of the day. But ultimately, what we are is a projection of our inner self. All things are actually part of our inner mind and our inner being.
That's why you're in there. And I'm out here. Felix. Felix. Oh, sleep experiment day 15. Day 15. Sleep experiment. Yes, all right. Day 15.
The two non-screaming captives took the books apart, smearing page after page with their own feces and pasted them calmly on the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption of the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very high level of strenuous exercise.
Felix! I demand the papers removed from the window! Felix! Remove the paper! Felix!
Day 15. Felix has covered the port window with paper from the book, in what appears to be his own excrement. Strange noises have been coming from inside the cell, but the oxygen levels show that the men are still awake and alive. I'm not sure how much longer the experiment can go on. Experiment Day 15, June 17th, 1945.
All of life, and especially our dreams, conflicts we have in life, are actually conflicts with ourselves. Everything is part of ourselves.
On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be freed."
Gentlemen, the experiment is over. We are turning off the gas and opening the chamber. Stand back against the wall or you will be shot. Upon examination, you will be freed.
We no longer wish to be freed.
Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them in life.
Of the sleep experiment. Upon opening the chamber, it became clear the level of mental damage caused by the gas.
The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest stuffed into the drains in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscles and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angle of the wounds indicated that most of it, if not all of them, was self-inflicted. The abominable organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscle attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact, but they had been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tracts of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of the days.
The men have ripped into their own flesh. The amount of blood loss by the 3 men should have killed them all.
Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives if you count ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arms of one of the doctors, when the heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point where there was more air in his vascular system than blood. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had been given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch thick wide leather strap on one wrist, even through the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had tripled the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn and he had broken 9 bones in the struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head, yes, when someone suggested, reluctantly, that they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon proceeding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and paper fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting.
Rushed to the emergency room. He tried to utter words, but his torn vocal cords allowed only a weak whisper. After fighting to stay awake under the anesthesia, he died on the operating table. 11:45 p.m. Felix was sent to the emergency room. He begged to be put back on the gas and screamed in agonizing pain when we brought anesthesia anywhere near him. We then attempted the surgery without it. He died the second his eyes closed from fatigue. 12:14 a.m.
Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he fell silent. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralysed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bounds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake.
I left Ulrich in the chamber to be alone with me. I needed answers. Ulrich, what happened? What did you do?
Hell could not wait for these men. The doctor, sicker than his patients. The boy, allowing his own kind to perish on account of his own negligence. The man who blindly follows evil for the sake of convenience. Without the fortitude of unconsciousness, all men will share this fate.
What are you?
I'm awake. I'm awake.
Whether or not you believe these men deserve this fate is irrelevant. No man can decide this. I only hope the world will forgive my part in this experiment. What these men did will be forever written in history. But I can still erase what I've done. End log, June 22nd, 1945.
All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that, at this point, all three were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might. First left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired to the EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal, most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper, scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things, not with you," he screamed at the man strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread."
You a dreamer? They say dreaming's dead. No one does it anymore. It's not dead, it's just it's been forgotten.
Sleep, dreams, nightmares allow us to release the shadow, the pent-up energy inside us all. The conflicts, the unresolution, dealing with the light, the dark, dealing with the inability to feel, solve the problems. That's what dreams really are for, to help us to adjust and deal with life. Without dreams, without sleep, we die, overwhelmed by the evil within.
I kept thinking while I was dreaming that all this meant something. There was some other meaning in it that I ought to find out.
The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out, "So nearly free."
Sleep is a nutrient, as essential as any other nutrient. It helps us to deal with our day, the good, the bad, the ups and downs. Helps us to deal with the shadow. Helps us to deal with the evil. Helps us to release and plan and to feel into the future, into the past. Sleep is a nutrient, as essential as any nutrient. It is because of experiments like this that the world had to change its idea about experimentation and to allow informed consent and to not allow such experimentation onto prisoners. This type of experimentation had to be prohibited. And in 1951, at a Geneva's convention, and at a convention in Helsinki, the world agreed that experimentation would have to have an ethics committee to review any experiment, and that informed consent would be needed, true informed consent, and we would no longer be able to hurt such people.